Trying to make sure that I'm enjoying the process I'm going through right now. More focused on getting in the gym and getting better at my game as I possibly can.
Jonathan Christian Davis, born February 27, 2002. Today's feature is a player whose game I actually like and saw potential in before he became considered one of the worst top 10 picks of all time. He was an All-American and the clear leader of one of college basketball's most surprising teams. Johnny Davis had the resume, the green light, and the pedigree to succeed. But 3 seasons after dominating the Big Ten and hearing his name called 10th overall in the 2002 NBA draft, his game has seemingly evaporated into the background. Davis went from scoring 19.7 points per game in college, overcoming double teams, hitting tough shots, and leading his team to a deep tournament run, to barely seeing the floor on one of the NBA's worst franchises. How does a player fall that far that fast? The answer lies somewhere between a flawed offensive identity and a failure to adapt. As much as the Wizards gambled on upside, Davis never developed a real separator at the NBA level. He wasn't an elite shooter, lacked burst to create separation, and played much smaller than his listed 6'4" frame. Some even compared his game to a less athletic, non-shooting version of Jalen Green, raw scoring instincts without the NBA tools to translate them. Most troubling of all, though, was the change in his jump shot. In high school and early college, Davis had a clean foundation, balanced feet, smooth elevation, and a fluid release. But over time, that form began to unravel. By his second season in the NBA, his jumper showed more of a hitch, and the release point shifted noticeably to the side of his head. Whether a result of rush mechanics, overcorrection, or simply lost confidence, the shot that once looked promising became one of his biggest liabilities. For a shooting guard in today's game, that's a death sentence. Add to that the reality of being drafted by the Wizards, an organization notorious for stalling player development, and it's clear Davis was never placed in an ideal environment to thrive. Washington didn't just lack vision, they lacked patience and structure. The result was a young player with potential slowly fading into obscurity before he ever got the chance to truly prove himself. Johnny Davis had talent, that's not the question. But in a league that doesn't wait for you to figure it out, his slow development, poor fit, and vanishing jumper made sure he never stood a real chance. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Johnny Davis, son of former NBA player Mark Davis, was a 6'4" shooting guard from La Crosse, Wisconsin, starring for local high school La Crosse Central High. There, he was a multi-sport athlete who thrived on toughness and competitive fire. He played quarterback in high school as well and didn't focus on solely basketball until later, but once he did, he took off. He won a state championship, Tribune Player of the Year twice, and named Wisconsin Mr. Basketball after his senior year. He committed to Wisconsin, and as a sophomore, he exploded onto the national radar, averaging nearly 20 points a game and earning Big Ten Player of the Year. His blend of footwork, mid-range scoring, and two-way effort made him a projected lottery pick. Scouts loved his motor, body control, and the confidence he played with. When the Washington Wizards selected him 10th overall in 2002, many saw him as a plug-and-play contributor right away, and maybe even a future star selected before NBA All-Star Jalen Williams. But despite that foundation, the transition to the NBA proved much more difficult than expected. Stunt number 1, a guard without a defining skill. Johnny Davis entered the league without a clear offensive identity. At Wisconsin, he was a master of rhythm scoring, pull-ups, turnarounds, and attacking defenders off balance, not to mention an unlimited green light his sophomore year. But the NBA doesn't give you time to find a rhythm. The game is faster, the defenders longer, and the space you once had vanishes quick. For guards like Davis, who aren't elite shooters, high flyers, or true facilitators, the adjustment is brutal. He wasn't quick enough to consistently beat defenders off the dribble, and his lack of burst showed when trying to finish around NBA length. At 6'4", he was already on the shorter end for his position and played even smaller than that. What made it worse was his deteriorating jumper. The shot that once looked polished began to show mechanical issues. His release got slower, more to the side of his head, and he lost confidence in it. In college, he could knock down just enough to keep defenders honest. In the pros, defenders dared him to shoot, and he didn't make them pay. All that said, Davis still had flashes. His effort defensively was never a question, and his willingness to compete remained a strength. In spurts, he showed the same mid-range instincts that made him a college star, and he carried himself with the same chip on his shoulder attitude. It's easy to forget how tough it is to even make it to the NBA, much less show up at 20 years old and try to carve out a role with limited spacing and shaky team structure around you. Johnny Davis didn't enter the league with a signature weapon, but it doesn't mean he didn't have skill. It just meant the climb would be steeper and the margin for error sometimes razor thin. Stunt number 2, drafted into developmental chaos. When the Washington Wizards drafted Johnny Davis 10th overall, they were hoping to strike gold with a high motor scorer who could give the franchise a new identity. Instead, they placed him in a system with no identity at all. Davis entered one of the NBA's most unstable organizations, an environment that has consistently failed to develop young talent or build sustainable rosters. From Rui Hachimura to Troy Brown Jr. to Denny Avdija, the Wizards have a track record of drafting promising players and failing to mold them into anything more. There was no long-term plan, no established culture, and no real infrastructure to nurture a rookie's growth. On top of that, Davis found himself buried in a backcourt rotation that was both crowded and directionless. Between veterans trying to salvage minutes, other young players competing for touches, and constant lineup experimentation, Davis was thrown into a situation where roles shifted nightly. He never built rhythm, he never carved out a lane, and without the structure to mask or correct his weaknesses, those were all anyone noticed. He never established enough momentum to earn a longer leash, and when he did get on the floor, he looked unsure of himself. His confidence as a scorer evaporated, his shot got worse, his handle looked shaky, he struggled to separate from defenders, and unlike his college days, there were no drawn-up plays to help him find space or build comfort. It was sink or swim, and he sank. The Wizards front office deserves criticism for the pick itself, but the failure extended beyond that. They took a player with clear limitations and placed him in a system that magnified every one of them. Whether Davis would have succeeded elsewhere is unknown, but in Washington, it was never going to happen. He wasn't just drafted into dysfunction, he was expected to thrive inside of it. Stunt number 3, no visible improvement. For a lottery pick still in his 20s, time is usually on your side, but in Johnny Davis's case, the lack of development year over year made it feel like the clock ran out fast. Across his first 2 seasons, Davis showed little to no improvement in the areas he needed most. His shooting percentages remained abysmal, his offensive assertiveness wavered, and his handle, which was already shaky coming in, looked just as loose in 2 years than it did during his rookie struggles. It's not just that he didn't break out, it's that he didn't grow. That's the part that made his situation more frustrating. Davis got chances. He played in Summer League, he had multiple stints in the G League, he got late season minutes on a team with nothing to play for, but the flashes never turned into consistent production. He didn't become a more confident shooter, he didn't figure out how to create better looks, and he didn't carve out a defensive niche strong enough to compensate for his limited offense. By the end of his second season, he was barely a part of the Wizards' plan, and in a league driven by upside, he wasn't offering any. At times, Davis looked like a player stuck between roles, not a true point guard, not a dependable shooting guard, and not athletic enough to mask the difference. With no elite physical tools, no standout skill to lean on, his game simply didn't adapt to the level around him. And in the NBA, adaptation isn't optional, it's everything. Davis came in as a polished college player, but in 2 years it was clear, if his game was going to evolve, it should have by now. All in all, Johnny Davis's fall from Big Ten superstar to forgotten lottery pick is one of the fastest declines we've seen from a top 10 selection in recent years. His inability to grow as a shooter, adjust to NBA speed, or carve out a defined role exposed the limitations in his game, and being drafted by one of the league's least structured franchises only sped up the process. Whether he was simply overrated coming out of college or mishandled at the next level, the result is the same. A player once believed to be a foundational piece now fighting just to stay on a roster. But while Davis hasn't lived up to his draft slot, his story isn't finished. He's only 22, and if he can rebuild his confidence, retool his jumper, and find a team with a clearer vision, there's still time for Johnny Davis to write a second chapter in his career. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.